Even though we try every single year, it is impossible to predict how an NFL season will go. However, what we can do is look at what could potentially go right and what could potentially go very, very wrong. Today, we'll have an optimistic preview of the 2024 Dallas Cowboys and a pessimistic preview of the 2024 Dallas Cowboys, all in the same show. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get to it. Here we go. What is up, everybody, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central, and catching up with the guys in between Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with shorter, quick-hitting videos, but excited about being with you live on this Thursday night, and excited to get a little bit more into the Cowboys season and just some of the bigger storylines and do this exercise of having an optimistic and a pessimistic preview all in the same show. As I said on the intro, man, we try to predict stuff every single year. We try to do that. And I think that a cool way to approach a preview is to look at both ends of the coin, right? And maybe that means going very in-depth into the worst case scenario, but also looking comfortably at the best case scenario. So tonight, we'll mix them both. And I think we'll have a fun show right now. I think in order to not have a feel bad segment of the show and then move on to a feel good segment or the other way around, I think it might be a good idea to kind of like look at both ends of the spectrum as we go through the show. So I think that's what we're gonna do. Welcome everyone into the show. Hit the like button for me. For those of you who are watching live, apologies about the delay, some Wi-Fi issues, and I wanted to make sure those were at least a little bit cleaned up because it was going to be a rough show if we moved on as we were planning to. Shout out to everyone in the chat right now. We've got Joe. We've got Katharina. Toxic. Shout out to Toxic. I think he was not around when I mentioned this and when I showed off this little gift that he sent my way. 5 Super Bowl rings for the Cowboys. Shout out to him, man. Appreciate the gift. Appreciate the other... I think you would call it a lamp for the Cowboys Stadium. Appreciate that so much, man. Meant the world to me. Shout out to Thorell also over on the Facebook side of things. We've got Katharina. We've got TC915. Got a lot of people here joining the show. Appreciate you all taking the time to listen to Primetime. Let's get to it. Let's get to it right away. And I'm going to start because you know how we roll on Primetime. We like to smile. We like to have a good time. So I'll start with an optimistic bullet point for our preview today, right? So here's how it's going to work. When we're talking about an optimistic side of, like an optimistic argument or an optimistic topic, we're going to like discuss how it could go well and why it would be massive for the Cowboys if it indeed goes well. Now, when we're touching on a pessimistic bullet point, it's going to be Murphy's Law type treatment, right? Like everything that could go wrong can go wrong. That's how we're going to treat this show. If we start on the optimistic side of things, yay. I think the biggest thing that can happen for the Cowboys is the offense picking up where it left off, minus the Green Bay Packers game. That's easier said than done, and what does it mean, right? I think mainly it's about the identity of the Cowboys offense. You remember not that long ago, we complained about the Cowboys not really having an identity. You know, when Kellen Moore was doing just about everything that he could come up with, and we were like, okay, but what is this Cowboys offense? And then for a time, there was this theme about, the Cowboys do not have an identity, right? They just do a little bit of everything, and it works. And in a way, it did work. But also, when things were not going their way, it didn't seem like the Cowboys had something that they could lean on. It didn't seem like there was something that the Cowboys were going to do in the big games. And it was a struggle. Now, the 2023 season starts, and the Cowboys had an identity, just wasn't very efficient, or it wasn't very explosive, right? When the Cowboys were just running the football, and when they threw the ball, it was like short, quick hitting passes, a lot of quick game, a lot of West Coast, old school type stuff. And then the 49ers game happens. Cowboys are punched in the mouth repeatedly. And then 2 weeks after that, they come up with what, for the first time in a long, long time, seemed like an actual identity, right? And after the Chargers game, they go out there, they're throwing the football on first and second down, they're running a lot of motion, they are force-feeding CeeDee Lamb no matter what. The ball is going to CeeDee. Dak Prescott is getting out of the pocket, he's using his legs, picking up first downs by running the rock, and there was a lot of things going on, but in the grand scheme of things, what the Cowboys were doing is they were throwing the football a whole lot, and they were throwing it to CeeDee a whole lot. And that was the identity of the Cowboys offense for a good chunk of the season, and it worked perfectly. Like, that was what we wanted to see for a long, long time. First down, they were throwing the ball. Second down, they were doing that as well. Red zone, I think the other day, Warren Sharp put out a tweet. The Cowboys were throwing the football 57% of the time in goal line situations. And that was one of the highest rates in the entire league. So, long story short, they handed the ball to Dak Prescott and were like, win the game for us. Win the games for us. Second offense in EPA per play by the end of the year. The only offense to score, or the only team, right? And there are some defensive scores there to consider, but the only team to exceed the 30-point per game mark. Not even the Chiefs got to 30 points. The Cowboys did. They were one of the best offenses. Well, I mean, they started improving, right? It was a rough start, but the Cowboys ended up as one of the best offenses in the red zone, or at least over the last few weeks of the season, they were that. I think the biggest thing that can happen for the Cowboys is to them to double down on that and obviously not walk away from it in the playoffs like they did versus the Packers, because suddenly the Cowboys looked much more static when it was do or die football, and we still have not figured out if that was maybe McCarthy shying away from it in a big game, or maybe it was more of a conspiracy theory where the Cowboys were like, hey, you know what? We want the more conservative approach on this one. Don't risk it. And it blew up on their faces. But it was a little bit more conservative football when Dallas got to the playoffs. I think if we're trying to look at it optimistically, the Cowboys were one of the best offenses when they put it on Dak Prescott. And you would assume that Mike McCarthy, being under the hot seat, he's going to try to do what worked last year. And he has a long history of being pass happy when he had Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. So I don't see any reason why you would not take on 2024 with such an aggressive mentality. Like, you have to do it, especially if you're expecting regression on the defensive side of the ball. We'll get to that later on in the show. Now, a pessimistic point. All right, here we go. We're gonna do a pessimistic one now. Tyler Guyton, and this will tie directly into the passing offense. Tyler Guyton has a rough welcome to the NFL. I think if you're doing a pessimistic preview, that's where you start. Because the way that Guyton has been described to us by smarter NFL draft analysts than me and film evaluators than me is that Tyler Guyton is a heck of an athlete, and you can see that on tape, right? He moves like somebody who is not that size, right? We've heard about him being a former basketball player. We've heard about him trying out as a defensive lineman before shifting to offensive line in Oklahoma, and actually TCU, if I'm remembering correctly. But we've heard all about that. Now, we've also heard that the technique is pretty raw. And when you watch the film, that looks like he's throwing hands and not landing them where they should be landing. So the punch accuracy from Tyler Guyton has been a problem, and that's something that you will struggle with at the NFL level, especially when you face top-tier pass rushers. I looked at the Cowboys schedule. This is how it starts for Guyton, and I know some of these guys might not move around as much as other edge rushers, but let me tell you who is on the schedule during the first 8 weeks of the season. Some notable edge rushers that the Cowboys will face, and that I would assume opposing teams are going to get on the rookie who has not fully developed the technique side of things. Week 1, it's obvious, Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns. Week 2, you could Chase Young, by the way. And I know Chase Young was very underwhelming for the 49ers last year, but I would assume it's still a favorable matchup for Chase Young to face a rookie like Tyler Guyton. Then you get Odafe Owe and the Baltimore Ravens defensive line. Week 4 versus the Giants, you get Brian Burns and you get Kayvon Thibodeau. That's a quality duo of edge rushers, even though Thibodeau has been up and down throughout his short career. Week 5 is perhaps one of the best defensive end duos in the entire NFL, or edge rusher duos in the NFL, because you get TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. Now, Highsmith, I think, was top 10 in PFF grade last year. Alex Highsmith is very underrated because TJ Watt gets a lot of the credit for what the Steelers do defensively. Highsmith is key on that, and that is somebody that you would also look at as a favorable matchup for him versus Tyler Guyton. Then Aiden Hutchinson from the Detroit Lions, right? And then week 8, after the bye week, Nick Bosa and the 49ers. That's a rough welcome into the NFL. Now, I can sit here and be like, he worked with Duke Manyweather. The Cowboys have hit the ball out of the park with their offensive line picks in recent memory. And all of that will be true. All of those would be fair arguments to make in his favor. He's got to be ready, though. The question is, will he be ready? When he was described as this raw prospect that was going to take some time, that might be average early on, does average win those matchups, though? I'm not entirely sure. He's got to be ready. Will he be ready? In a pessimistic preview, that would be one of the best, the top things at the list, in my opinion, that could go wrong for Dallas. Their bet at left tackle, particularly in pass pro. Not to mention, there's a big question mark on the other side of the offensive line with Terrence Steele. So that would be point number 1 in my pessimistic preview. By the way, I did write these previews for ADZsports.com. You can go check that out on the website in the Dallas Cowboys section. They are separate articles. One is pessimistic. The other one is optimistic. Next on the list, and we'll go to the optimistic side of things now. Because again, I don't want to have like this sad mood throughout the show when we get to the pessimistic preview. So we'll jump back and forth. Mike Zimmer run defense just with the scheme improves. Like Mike Zimmer improves the run defense just via the scheme. That's a tricky one because I've had these conversations before on the show. I don't think the Cowboys front 7 improved. We'll talk about the linebackers in a bit. But looking at the defensive line, I don't think it improved. I think you lost important depth on the edges. Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler Jr. being off the table is not great. They were solid rotational pieces of the Cowboys defense. But mostly, I am uncomfortable with the defensive tackle room, which I have described as my biggest concern for the Cowboys in 2024. I don't know if pushing all the chips on Mazi Smith was the way to go when he didn't even maintain the weight that he had to maintain as a rookie. And I don't want to pile on him or anything like that. I just think it's aggressive to make that gamble, to be like, okay, Mazi Smith, all in on him. I think it would have been smart to have that insurance policy in Jonathan Hankins by keeping him for the low price tag that he went for with the Seattle Seahawks. So I'm concerned, quite concerned about the defensive tackle. I think that the guys that are viable to stay on the inside will be on the lighter side of things. So Chauncey Golston, former hybrid between end and tackle, even though he's now playing tackle, he's on the lighter side of things. Ozo Dijisuwa even, he's on the lighter side of things, even though he's very good, and that part is not exactly a concern. The wear and tear might be, though, and the run defense specifically might be. So the way that Mike Zimmer, though, could improve the run defense is just by finding answers to stop it that are not loading the box, right? So the Cowboys being able to play 2 high defenses, 2 high coverages, while finding a way to set the front and not be as aggressive as Dan Quinn was, and maybe that results in better situations versus Kyle Shanahan-style offenses and all that, which is where the Cowboys struggled under Dan Quinn. And who knows exactly why that was, but I do think Mike Zimmer being better in that front because he's much more multiple, much more versatile, should help the Cowboys run defense. The problem, though, that I see is that the personnel did not improve. Where the Cowboys arguably improved is at linebacker, though. And I say that because even though Leighton Vander Esch is out, right, retired after the injuries and all that, the Cowboys did bring in Eric Kendricks, who has been reliable as they come, honestly, over the last few years. Even though he wasn't great with the Chargers, still had over 100 tackles, which has been the story for him for 5+ years. I think the number of seasons, straight seasons with at least 100 tackles is 8. He's been awesome in that sense. And he's versatile, he's smart, he's somebody that will sniff out things that are going on the field, and he's somebody that can come in and help Mike Zimmer implement the defense and show it to everyone on the Cowboys. So I think there's an upgrade there. There might be an upgrade in the sense that you just don't have Marquise Bell on the field, and not to hate on him, because I think it was remarkable what he did in 2023 to be able to switch positions days before the season started and do so at a high level. I think it's a remarkable fit. But he didn't have the size, obviously. So you're upgrading in that sense. Now, Overshown, if he's healthy, could be an upgrade. Obviously, he's got to earn this spot, though. I don't think it's going to be a clear-cut battle because I do think Damon Clark is going to put up a fight. The Cowboys respect him because he's been versatile, because he's played multiple roles on the defense. So that's going to be a little bit of a battle when the Cowboys have only 2 linebackers on the field. Who is going to be behind Eric Kendricks? Arguably, the Cowboys got better at linebacker, though. Defensive tackles might not let us enjoy that, though, is what I'm trying to say here. However, scheme-wise, Cowboys might be better off with Mike Zimmer, who will put a much bigger emphasis on stopping the run than his predecessor did. And this is not to criticize Dan Quinn exactly, who led the number 1 defense in EPA per play over the last 3 years. That should be recognized. There's a lot that Dan Quinn did great. One of those things is the way that he freed up Micah Parsons consistently when he was coming up with these creative pressures and trying to do everything to let Micah Parsons have a one-on-one. Who knows if Mike Zimmer is going to be able to do that, but it's going to be a big part of how the Cowboys defense performs, however. Anyways, that's optimistic point number 2. I'm going to flip it immediately and be like, okay, what I just talked about, the nose tackle with Masi and the defensive tackle, is one of the biggest reasons to be a pessimist, though. Sure, Mike Zimmer can come in with all sorts of ideas to stop the run and to stop Kyle Shanahan. Do the Cowboys have the talent? Do the Cowboys have the horses to actually stop it? Now, I'm going to flip it and staying in the run game, because I do think one of the biggest reasons to be pessimistic is the run game woes. That goes for the 2 sides of the ball. What if the Cowboys offense just doesn't magically fix the run game? Because here's what Cowboys Nation is betting on for the Cowboys offense. And I'm not saying it's wrong. But it's also one of those things that, okay, we got to be ready for anything. Here's what I mean. There's a lot of people that think that the Cowboys' run offense is going to be better for 2 reasons. Number 1, because Mike McCarthy is going to fix this scheme with Brian Schottenheimer. The scheme was not great for the run in 2023. It just wasn't. And it wasn't particularly that the play design was bad. It just felt like they were never doing anything special. Like it felt like they were running zone or duo, and that was pretty much it. We didn't see a lot of counter. We didn't see a lot of sweeps. We didn't see a lot of pulling linemen. It was a bland running scheme. And a lot of fans are like, okay, they're going to fix that going into 2024. And all I'm saying is, are they? I don't think we can. No. Running back talent is slightly worse than it was last year because you don't have Tony Pollard. And even though he wasn't exactly the same after the injury and all that, forget about the financials. Pollard would make this a better running back room. There's no question about that, in my opinion. Now, center. I love Cooper Beebe. I really do. And I'm excited about watching him play in the NFL. I think he's my favorite to win the battle with Brock Hoffman. That being said, though, like, we have not seen him play, right? So I do think that's kind of like one of those things that what if center is a little bit of a bigger issue than we think, at least early on. Because Cooper Beebe is going to be a third-round rookie when the season starts. We'll see if it's him or Hoffman manning the position. And even Hoffman, we've seen very little. He was solid when he was called upon to replace Tyler Viadic, right? That Cardinals game in Week 3. He was not the reason why the Cowboys lost or anything like that. But the way that I would break it down is optimistic because of the scheme, pessimistic because of the talent to execute these schemes, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I just think there's some risk to having a new center and somebody that we have not seen play yet in the NFL at all. So that would be one of my biggest reasons to be pessimistic. Let me pause here for a moment and read some of your comments. Thank you for being here tonight, by the way. Do me a favor. Hit the like button for me if you enjoyed the show. That means the world to me, as always. Toxic Tom says, what a shocker. Poor defensive tackles, a problem that has persisted since Wade Phillips. And it is true. It is true. Let's see here. Garrett is running out of excuses for sure. Who is that? Oh, that is McCarthy. I understand. Fat Garrett is running out of excuses for sure. He's referring to Mike McCarthy. Oh boy. Gregory says McCarthy should have been fired at the end of last season. Let's see here. Katharina, hit the like button, please. Hey, thank you to Katharina, who's keeping everyone in check and asking them to hit the thumbs up. Let's see here. Brian Thompson says, I'll say this, Tyler Guyton will be practicing against the best. That is true, right? Like going up against Micah Parsons day in and day out in the heat of Oxnard will be pretty helpful for Guyton. We'll see if that is the case, and hopefully he just doesn't get frustrated or anything like that. Tyler Smith, had a very cool quote on Tyler Guyton a few days ago, or through Michael Gelkin and the Dallas Morning News. By the way, Michael Gelkin, one of the best in the business, Cowboys insider, revealed that he's stepping away from his job as a Cowboys reporter. He's moving to Washington. Shout out to him, man. He's been on the show. He's been on Primetime. He's been on Sky's show several times, I believe, at least once, but I do think he's been there multiple times. Gelkin is an absolute legend. We're going to miss him. I think Cowboys Nation is going to miss him. But anyways, in his story, he had a quote from Tyler Smith, which went, I watched the rookie minicamp tape. So this is Tyler Smith, who uploaded the footage to his iPad. I was extremely impressed with Guyton's movement skills, his speed off the ball, his length. As he learns the offense and gets faster and faster, he's going to evolve at a staggering rate. But he has a really good starting point right now. His upside is high. It's really high. We could play together for a really, really long time. Love to hear that from Tyler Smith on several fronts. Number one, great to hear that about Guyton. But also I love to hear Tyler Smith, year 3 of his career, and he's already kind of like one of the veterans of the offensive line, and if Zach Martin does retire in 2025, as many of us expect him to, Tyler Smith is going to be the top dog of that offensive line, So it's kind of like cool to see him embrace that leadership role and take it upon himself to be like, I'll watch Tyler Guyton tape. I'll watch what he's doing, see what I can tell him, what I can point out. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Gilbert says, I'm watching the Summer League with LeBron James' son and watching Mo on the phone. Have a good night. Shout out to Gilbert. Thank you for joining, man. And thank you for being tuned into Primetime while you're doing other stuff. I really, really appreciate that. Anyways, optimistic point now. We're going back to the optimistic side of things. It's never bad to get some help. So, it's never bad to get some help. Eagles' struggles persist in 2024. That is one of the best things that could happen to the Cowboys that they don't control at all. But if we're talking about things that could go well in an optimistic preview, you got to talk about that. The Eagles finished last season 1-5. That was their final 6-game streak. 1-5, and then they lost in the playoffs. The Eagles struggled capital S struggled. And they did so in several fronts. They had some, I don't want to say locker room trouble, but there was some friction there that we've heard about. We know that A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts had those exchanges. We know that Jalen Hurts had some interesting interactions with Nick Sirianni. There was some stuff going on there. Season ends, 2 coordinators are fired, which basically lays the table to kind of have so Nick Sirianni has like a new season where he's got to prove it now that he's got a couple of new coordinators in Kellen Moore and Big Fangio. That sets the table for that. Secondary issues, especially at a cornerback, which they're trying to cover up through the NFL draft, but still they're investing, they're betting on rookies to turn that around. And the truth is, even though they still have Jalen Hurts, even though they still have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, even though they have Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, and on paper are a very dangerous offense, they sometimes still lack answers. The Eagles were not explosive running the football in 2023. They could do the tush-push, move the chains, and they could ground and pound you and be like, okay, 3 yards, 4 yards, and kind of like slowly gain yards, but they were not being explosive like they were on their, I always forget, man, Shane Steichen, when he was their offensive coordinator. That name is always escaping my head. I don't know why. Now head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. But anyways, if the Eagles' troubles persist, that's one of the best things that can happen for the Cowboys. Now, they cannot control that, but that would mean they would be in a comfortable spot to win the NFC East, get a home playoff game, which does not necessarily guarantee you a win, even against the number 7 seed, as we recently learned, but it's still a big factor in the postseason, having your seeding, because it gives you a better chance at making a deep playoff run. So even though we're still a little bit traumatized by whatever happened in January 14, who's counting 186 days, but you know what I'm saying here. That's one of the biggest things that could happen for Dallas, and it's going on the optimistic preview. Flipping it to the pessimistic preview right now. And I'm just going to say it, right? Trevon Diggs, the Marvin Overshown, coming back from injury is great, but also that's kind of like what the Cowboys are betting on to improve. We've complained a lot about the Cowboys not going out there and spending big money in free agency. Their biggest additions were Eric Kendricks, Ezekiel Elliott, who are due a combined $5 million. The Cowboys just decided we're not going to spend. This year, we're going to take it easy. We're going to save up for those big contracts up ahead. We don't know exactly whose contracts because none has gotten done yet, but they're bracing for that a little bit. One of the justifications for that was that, hey, Trevon Diggs is coming back, so we don't necessarily have to pay Stephon Gilmore because we have a top-tier cornerback on the way. And then Marvin Overshown is going to be joining the linebackers, and we have depth and a potential starter in him, depending on how things go now that he's back from an ACL injury. And yet, I don't think anyone has gotten over the Michael Gallup and Terrence Steele thing, where they both came back from ACL injuries and just were not the same upon returning. That goes on the pessimistic preview, because if we get to Oxnard and Diggs is not 100%, what are we expecting at a cornerback? I talked about this potentially leading to a Stephon Gilmore reunion last night, because Stephon Gilmore was out there talking about teams seeing what they've got in camp before him signing. And also at linebacker, what does it mean? Like, it's Kendricks and Clark or bust if Overshown is not at 100%. It's a big risk. It's a big risk the Cowboys are making here and are taking on here. And I like the way that William White puts it on Facebook. He says there's so many things that we are betting on this year. They're betting at cornerback, that Trevon Diggs is fine and ready to go. They're betting at running back, where you're hoping Rico Dowdle proves to be durable, or you're hoping Ezekiel Elliott thrives in a less demanding role, you're betting at center on a center or Brock Hoffman. You're betting at left tackle on Tyler Guyton, who was considered a raw prospect during the draft process. You're betting at right tackle on Trent Steele bouncing back, and we could keep going. You're betting on Jalen Tolbert and Jalen Brooks, unproven guys at number 3, right? You're betting on Massey Smith enormously at defensive tackle, even though he hasn't proven anything at all to you. So I like the way that he puts it, that William White puts it. There's a lot of bets. There's a lot of little gambles. There's a lot of little gambles going on this team. And if you're talking about a pessimistic preview, you're going to lose some of those bets. And you remember that scene from Ryan Gosling on The Big Short when he's pulling out the Jenga blocks, when he's trying to explain the CDOs, the things that ended up in the 2007 financial crisis, and he's pulling out the blocks until the tower comes down crumbling. And Ryan Gosling is like, and then that happens. Like, if the Cowboys, if those little gambles are not paying off and Ryan Gosling is pulling those Jenga blocks out of there, the whole thing is going to crumble, man. I think that's one of the biggest things that should be on the pessimistic preview. There's a lot of little gambles, little risks. And if you guys have been watching Primetime, you know that's like the 100th time that we've used The Big Short for illustration. That's such a great movie. Anyways, one of my favorite movies. To wrap this all up, the range for the Cowboys. Let me know in the chat, what do you think about this? I'm interested. What is the least amount of wins that you could realistically see the Cowboys have at the end of the season? And what is the most? So what is the ceiling and what is the floor for you when you're talking about the 2024 Dallas Cowboys? I made this point the other day when we were talking about the NFC East. I believe the range is a little bit wider for a team like the Eagles. And that goes both ways. I could see the Eagles have 7 wins in the season, but I also can see them have 14 wins. And that's because I just don't know a whole lot about what they're going to do coaching-wise, and I don't know how much they're going to be able to bounce back to their 2022 form and all of that. But then with the Cowboys, I think it's a little bit tighter. So if you ask me, I would go 8 wins is my floor, and that's a very low floor because I think that would be very tough to get. Like, I think 9 wins feels like a much more realistic floor for Dallas just because they're too talented and they've proven so much with what they have. And Dak Prescott has proven that he can perform well under a shaky offensive line, that I just don't see them winning under 9 unless it's like a rough stretch early on kind of thing. But then my best case scenario for them in terms of wins would be 13, but also I think 12 is a much more realistic number for them as the ceiling. Like I said, 9 versus 12 compared to like 7 and 14 for the Eagles. I think the range is larger for them. I think the Cowboys, though, are much more entrenched in 9 to 12 wins. My prediction was 11 wins, honestly, when I had my scheduled predictions. I think they're going to end up winning 11 games this season, slightly less than in previous years. Ideally, though, your losses would come against some AFC teams, and for the tiebreaker purpose late in the year. That's more or less, I'm going to go worst case scenario, very, very worst case scenario, 8 wins, but much more realistically, a much more real number, I think it's 9. And then best case scenario, give me 13 wins, but much more realistic, 12 wins. In an optimistic and a pessimistic preview, though. Let's see what you guys have to say, though. Gregory says least 9 wins, most 12 wins. So Gregory is more or less with me there. Gilbert says Cowboys 13 wins. Catherine says 10 as the least, 14 as the most. Toxic Tom with much lower numbers. He says 5 for lowest, 10 for highest. You ran back an incompetent, lame duck head coach with a worse team. Make it make sense. I think that the way that you would buy into the Cowboys winning a little bit more games is by looking, because we're not talking about how they're going to do in the playoffs, right? Looking at the last 3 years, they won 12 games each year. And I just cannot get over the fact that, okay, this is the best version of Dak we've seen when Mike McCarthy took over the offense. And CeeDee Lamb is an Offensive Player of the Year candidate, blah, blah, blah. I do think that's why I would go with the Cowboys winning that many ball games. But there are some concerns for sure. Cam says 1 game to beat whoever is leading. Isidro says record could be 13-4 or 7-10. Everybody has to contribute and ball out. That's what I like about the NFL season, man. We just don't know. We just don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be a long year for Dallas, though, just because you know that whatever they do in the regular season is just going to lack some taste. I think the one thing that could get the fan base excited about this team during the regular season is them beating the San Francisco 49ers in Week 8. That's the one thing that I believe could change Cowboys Nation's mindset from we'll see in the playoffs after 3 consecutive exits, disappointing exits, versus, oh, wait, something might be different, right? And we've fallen on that trap several times before. I'm not saying that something will indeed be different, but I'm saying if there's one thing in the regular season that can happen that might change the minds of everybody is if the Cowboys beat the 49ers in Week 8. And of course, this is assuming that it's a healthy team of the 49ers that has Brock Purdy, that has at least most of their playmakers and all of that. Assuming that is the case. I think that would be the one single thing that could change the way that this fan base looks at this team. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, do me a favor. Hit the like button for me if you enjoyed the show. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with. Remember, these are not exactly predictions. These are just what could go well and have an optimistic preview, and then what could go wrong in a very, very pessimistic preview. Ladies and gentlemen, hit the like button for me. I'll see you on Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Appreciate you so much. As always, bye-bye.